Have you ever scrolled through a dating app at midnight, swiping through hundreds of faces only to feel more alone than when the evening started? What if the very tools promised to connect people are systematically dismantling the possibility of genuine intimacy? This is the paradox at the heart of why real connections are dying out. Modern dating myths exposed. Understanding these myths might reveal why dating feels increasingly exhausting and what can actually be done about it. Here's what makes this cultural moment so psychologically fascinating. For the first time in human history, romantic connection operates through algorithms designed not for love, but for engagement metrics. Dating apps are now how a substantial portion of young adults meet partners. Meeting online has become one of the most common origin stories for modern relationships. Yet simultaneously, users report unprecedented levels of frustration, burnout, and the persistent sense that dating has lost its spark, that something essential has been drained from the process. And here's the delicious irony. Research shows couples who meet online can and do form committed relationships, but on average, they report slightly lower relationship satisfaction and less intense feelings of intimacy, passion, and commitment than couples who meet offline. So connection is possible, but the default systems work against depth, which raises a provocative question about what's really happening here. The first myth that needs exposing is perhaps the most seductive. More options means better connections. The logic seems unassailable. If someone has access to thousands of potential partners instead of dozens, surely the probability of finding compatibility increases proportionally. This is the promise whispered by every swipe interface, every match notification, every algorithmic suggestion. But the psychology tells a different story entirely. Swipe apps create a perception of infinite choice, and that perception fundamentally alters decision-making patterns. The gamified interfaces encourage quick judgments and constant scanning for someone better. Studies examining high app usage find associations with more dating opportunities, certainly, but also with higher levels of anxiety, depression, and body image concerns. Many users describe their overall experience as average at best, yet continue using apps while feeling disheartened, trapped in a cycle of FOMO and choice overload. And here's what the abundance paradox reveals. When options feel limitless, the psychological calculus shifts in subtle but devastating ways. More choice leads to decision paralysis, where committing to any single option feels premature because the next swipe might reveal someone superior. It creates lower commitment thresholds because there's always the possibility of swiping for someone else if things require effort. And crucially, it encourages shallow initial interactions instead of investing depth in one person. Think about the economic principle of sunk costs. When something is scarce and requires investment to obtain, people value it more highly and work harder to maintain it. But when something appears infinitely abundant and easily replaced, the incentive to invest diminishes dramatically. Dating apps have accidentally created a supply-side problem that makes everyone seem simultaneously available and disposable, which connects directly to another pervasive myth. The second myth worth interrogating is that online dating killed real relationships, that because of apps, serious partnerships are essentially extinct. This narrative dominates social commentary, but the research reveals something more nuanced. International data from over 6,000 people across 50 countries shows that roughly 16 to 21% met their partners online, and these couples do report slightly lower average satisfaction, intimacy, passion, and commitment than those who met offline. Researchers suggest several possible explanations. There's less homogamy, less similarity in backgrounds and values for online couples, which can affect long-term compatibility. There's also been a shift in user motives. Early adopters of dating platforms were predominantly seeking long-term partners, while many current users are more casual or short-term oriented, which naturally lowers relationship quality averages. But here's the crucial distinction. Many successful couples still meet online. The issue isn't that apps doom relationships categorically. The issue is that the system architecture makes it easier to ignore red flags, treat people as disposable profiles, and stay in low-effort situationships instead of committed relationships. The medium isn't the message, but it's shaping the message in powerful ways, and this connects to perhaps the most culturally loaded myth of all. The third myth deserves particular scrutiny, that hookup culture is what everyone wants, that authentic commitment has been replaced by universal preference for casual encounters. This narrative appears constantly in social commentary, but survey data tells a more complicated story. There has been a normalization of hookup culture and situationships, with emotional intimacy often sidelined in favor of convenience and instant gratification. Many people actually desire emotional security and companionship, but feel pressured by norms that glamorize casual encounters, nonchalance, and specifically not catching feelings. Some reports on younger demographics suggest a generation that's pragmatic about love, often not prioritizing committed relationships while juggling economic stress, mental health challenges, and career demands. But here's where the psychology gets truly interesting. There's a profound mismatch between desire and performance. Lots of people want connection, but perform indifference, adopting personas of being unbothered, subscribing to philosophies of attract, don't chase, specifically to protect themselves from vulnerability. And this protective strategy ends up killing the very connection they crave. It's a tragedy of emotional commons. Individual rational self-protection produces collective relational poverty, which reveals something important about how behavioral patterns become self-reinforcing. The cultural scripts around emotional availability have become fascinatingly inverted. Chronic nonchalance gets marketed as attractive. Caring and effort get labeled as cringe or desperate. Vulnerability gets interpreted as weakness rather than courage. This creates a bizarre dating landscape where everyone is performing disinterest while secretly hoping someone else will break character first and risk genuine emotion. The game theory is elegant in its dysfunction. If vulnerability could be betrayed with emotional abandonment or ridicule, the rational strategy is to defect, to maintain emotional distance as protection. But when everyone defects, connection becomes impossible. The only way out is for enough people to risk cooperating, to signal genuine interest despite the possibility of rejection. But the current cultural moment punishes exactly that behavior. And this connects to another myth that's worth examining closely. The fourth myth operates more subtly but perhaps more destructively than the others, that if connection is meant to be, it will be effortless, that real relationships should require minimal work, and needing to try means incompatibility. This romantic ideal has ancient roots, but modern dating culture has turbocharged it. Low tolerance for discomfort, conflict, or slow-burn attraction becomes standard. Ghosting replaces difficult conversations. Constant grass is greener thinking activates whenever the initial dopamine rush fades. Users across social platforms describe modern dating as death by 1,000 cuts, tiny disappointments, half connections, ghosting, breadcrumbing, that slowly erode willingness to invest deeply. And here's the feedback loop. People expect disappointment, so they invest less, which produces shallow outcomes, which proves their belief that real connection is dying. The prophecy becomes self-fulfilling through the very mechanisms meant to avoid pain. But there's a deeper structural issue worth examining. Dating apps fundamentally change how humans connect by turning people into products in a marketplace. The gamification isn't accidental, it's the core business model. Swipe interfaces train users to make snap judgments based on a few photos to see people as interchangeable options rather than complex beings. This encourages superficial filtering, height, aesthetics, vibe, over values, communication style, or attachment patterns. Review articles examining dating app usage find associations with lower body image satisfaction, increased social comparison, and mental health strain in certain demographics. Qualitative research with younger users reveals that many feel exhausted, replaceable, and discouraged by repeated ghosting, rude encounters, or receiving few matches. And here's what's particularly interesting about relationship formation in this context. Recent research on college students found that apps are widely used, but many users feel confused about whether their app activity will actually lead to long-term relationships. Motivations range from boredom and ego boosts to genuine partner seeking, which creates fundamentally mismatched expectations. Someone might be swiping for validation while their match is looking for a life partner. The platform provides no mechanism for clarifying this, except through time-consuming conversations that feel awkward to have early. So people default to ambiguity, which maximizes optionality while minimizing clarity, another individually rational choice that produces collectively poor outcomes. Social media conversations reveal these frustrations in vivid detail. Common themes in viral posts and discussion threads capture the zeitgeist perfectly. Everyone's juggling multiple options simultaneously, so presence becomes divided and attention scarce. People want relationship benefits with situationship commitment levels. Nonchalance and emotional unavailability get marketed as attractive while caring, and effort becomes stigmatized. The problems people name consistently are ghosting and breadcrumbing as default exit strategies, over-reliance on texting and direct messages instead of in-person time, which makes miscommunication easier and emotional investment shallower, and filtered, curated images creating unrealistic expectations that produce disappointment when meeting in real life. But there's an important counterpoint worth noting. Some users push back against the doom narrative, pointing out that people have always complained about modern dating, that every generation feels their romantic landscape is uniquely broken. They argue that technology amplifies both positive and negative possibilities, and what's really missing isn't the tools but intentionality, emotional skills, and in-person community spaces where organic meetings can happen. This critique has merit. The question isn't whether apps are inherently evil or irredeemable. The question is why connection feels harder despite, or perhaps because of, unprecedented access to potential partners. And several structural changes help explain this feeling. There's been a documented decline of organic social spaces. Fewer community hubs, clubs, and offline events means more isolation and heavier reliance on apps as the primary connection mechanism. Broader research on loneliness identifies technology as a major driver, with social media and online interactions replacing deeper in-person relationships. Cultural scripts emphasizing hustle culture, individualism, and constant self-optimization create environments where vulnerability and interdependence get devalued. Emotional self-protection, never needing anyone, staying unbothered, becomes aspirational rather than recognizing that healthy interdependence is actually the foundation of secure relationships, and there's widespread emotional fatigue after enough negative experiences, ghosting, infidelity, casual situations that weren't really casual. Many people shut down emotionally or keep interactions surface level to avoid pain, which ironically destroys the possibility of the very connection they desire. This brings up several additional myths worth exposing explicitly. First myth: everyone else is having an amazing dating life except you. Reality: most people report disappointment and fatigue. Social media shows highlight reels, not the grinding reality of modern dating. The suffering isn't uniquely personal, it's structurally produced. Second myth, dating apps are the only viable way to meet someone now. Reality, apps are common but not mandatory. There's growing movement toward meeting through hobbies, communities, and friend-of-friend networks, a return to older social technologies that actually work better for depth. Third myth, caring less makes someone more attractive. Reality, chronic nonchalance signals emotional unavailability, which might generate attention short-term but systematically sabotages durable connection. Research on relationship quality consistently shows that communication, similarity in values, and secure attachment predict satisfaction far more than meet-cute origin stories. And finally, the myth that real relationships just happen, that work on communication, attachment, or boundaries is unnecessary. This is perhaps the most destructive myth because it frames necessary relationship skills as evidence of incompatibility rather than normal developmental challenges that every partnership faces. But here's where the story could take a more hopeful turn. Real connection isn't actually dying. It's being systematically suppressed by poorly designed systems and maladaptive cultural scripts, which means it can be recovered through better system design and more conscious individual choices. People are returning to offline and interest-based spaces, clubs, meetups, hobby groups, and in-person events where shared interests provide the first filter rather than appearance alone. Alternative platforms are growing that emphasize values, deeper profiles, and slower pacing over endless swiping. And crucially, individual responsibility makes a difference. Real connection survives and thrives when people drop performative nonchalance and communicate clearly, set boundaries around app usage and ghosting behavior, and work on their attachment patterns, expectations, and emotional literacy. These aren't dramatic interventions. They're subtle shifts that accumulate into genuinely different outcomes. Here's what actually needs to happen to reverse this trajectory. First, recognize that the exhaustion and disappointment aren't personal failings. They're predictable responses to systems designed for engagement rather than connection. That recognition removes shame and creates space for strategic action. Second, audit current dating behaviors honestly. How much time gets spent on apps versus in-person social activities? What percentage of conversations move beyond surface pleasantries? When was the last time genuine interest was expressed directly rather than through careful ambiguity? These questions reveal where patterns need adjustment. Third, deliberately build or join communities organized around genuine interests rather than dating explicitly. The paradox is that romantic connection often emerges most naturally when it's not the primary goal, when people interact repeatedly in contexts that reveal character, values, and compatibility gradually rather than through curated profiles. Fourth, practice communicating clearly about intentions and desires even when it feels vulnerable. This doesn't mean declaring love prematurely or demanding commitment inappropriately. It means being honest about whether someone is looking for casual connection, exploring possibilities, or seeking serious partnership. Clarity early prevents the situationship drift that leaves everyone confused and disappointed. Fifth, limit dating app usage deliberately. Set specific times for checking apps rather than constant scrolling. Commit to meeting matches in person relatively quickly rather than endless texting that creates false intimacy. Remember that apps are tools, not primary social spaces. They work best when used strategically and sparingly rather than as default entertainment. Sixth, work on attachment patterns and emotional regulation skills. Understanding whether someone tends toward anxious, avoidant, or secure attachment helps explain relationship patterns and provides roadmap for growth. Seventh, resist cultural scripts that frame emotional availability as weakness. Being clear about interest, expressing care, showing up consistently, These aren't desperate behaviors. They're evidence of emotional maturity and relationship skill. The cultural moment might punish them temporarily, but they're exactly what builds lasting connection with people who share similar values. And finally, accept that modern dating requires more conscious intention than previous generations needed, because the structural supports have eroded and been replaced with systems that work against depth. The emotional truth beneath all of this is simultaneously sobering and empowering. Real connection isn't dying because people are fundamentally different or because some essential human capacity has been lost. It's dying because the ecology of modern dating, the platforms, the cultural scripts, the economic pressures, the social isolation, systematically makes genuine intimacy more difficult to achieve. Every individual is making locally rational choices that produce globally irrational outcomes. Protecting oneself through emotional distance makes sense when vulnerability gets punished. Keeping options open makes sense when commitment feels risky. Optimizing for initial attraction makes sense when deeper compatibility requires time to assess. But these individual strategies compound into collective relational poverty, where everyone is searching for connection while the system makes it increasingly hard to find. The good news, the genuinely hopeful insight, is that systems created by human choices can be changed by different human choices. Real connection isn't gone. It's been crowded out by noise, buried under poor incentive structures, and obscured by cultural narratives that misunderstand what actually builds lasting intimacy. Recovery doesn't require revolutionary change. It requires countless small acts of courage, expressing genuine interest despite rejection risk, investing in communities beyond dating apps, communicating clearly about desires and boundaries, doing the internal work on attachment and emotional skills, resisting the cultural pressure toward performed nonchalance, and believing that depth is worth the discomfort it requires. These choices won't fix systemic problems overnight, but they create pockets of genuine connection in a landscape of superficiality. They become proof that different outcomes are possible, and gradually, as more people make similar choices, the ecology shifts. Not because technology changes or because dating apps disappear, but because enough humans decide that genuine connection is worth prioritizing over the hollow efficiency of endless optionality. That decision, repeated by enough people, doesn't just expose the myths, it writes a different story entirely.
Thank you for watching. If you want to learn how to better understand avoidance, relationships, and psychological biases, then subscribe to our channel, because you deserve beautiful relationships.